Good evening, everyone. My name is Henry Schneider from Process and Product Quality Consulting, and this is another chapter in our Business Performance Podcast. So today I have the pleasure of talking with Cisco Vicenty from the FDA and the Case for Quality. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Henry, and I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so to begin with, would you please briefly describe the FDA's Case for Quality and your role as the Case for Quality Program Manager?
Sure. So the Case for Quality kind of was an outgrowth from just a pattern of always seeing things in the medical device industry repeating. We were seeing the same kind of issues, the same efforts, the same problems that kept arising, and no real change, no matter how many enforcement actions we took, no matter how much we communicated, no matter how many warning letters we issued. We recognized that we needed to do something very different. So after a lot of work and some, benchmarking and studying outside in the industry, we really came to the conclusion that in order to really change the dynamic, we needed to start something that was radically different than what we were doing beforehand, and that's where we did our Case for Quality effort. I mean, in a nutshell, really what it is, it's a collaborative engagement across the whole medical device ecosystem, because this isn't just a FDA problem, it's not just a medical device manufacturer problem, it's a collective solution that was needed that's really focused on how do we advance the quality and safety of medical devices here that are marketed in the United States for patients. My role as Case for Quality Manager really is about, directing, driving, operationalizing a lot of what that vision entails.
Okay, wonderful. So what types of common things that you see across the board that led you to this?
So, things that we've seen across the board, I guess, that led us here. It's really a combination of a lot, but I think fundamentally one of the things that we saw is that there is a huge focus on compliance. Mm-hmm. Medical device manufacturers have been just trained, conditioned after decades of not just us. This isn't just an FDA issue, right? This is across also in the international front under the ISO standards to fulfill the regulatory compliance in order to do business. There was never a focus to move past that. There was never anything to drive or deliver or recognize when manufacturers were moving past that. So it really was about saying we needed to recognize and really acknowledge a different way to view organizations who've already met that compliance bar. They've said it. The systems are established. They're legal. They can fulfill the regulatory activities. Now, how do we go about and make them better? Allow the manufacturers to be better and learn how to recognize that system in action.
Okay. All right. So what are one or two of the biggest myths or misconceptions out there when it comes to quality and the FDA and what we're trying to do now?
This is an interesting one. This is probably going to get me a stern talking to, but let me start with the first one. It's complying with the regulations equals quality. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the biggest one to start with. Just because you can fulfill the requirements of the regs. Now, the regs, they're a phenomenal starting point. They tell you what all the sub-pieces, at the very least, you need to be in the game. But that doesn't mean that's the best way that they need to operate or work together. And it provides no details on how to really deliver on that. So you can definitely say you've complied, you fulfilled all the elements of that regulation, and have a system that is really not functioning the way it's supposed to work. The kind of organic way it's supposed to function together.
Yeah.
That's one. The other one that I can think of that is, very much my own personal piece that I like to really get people to understand. There's always this concept that FDA has the immediate authority to remove product that's not good from the market or to stop shipping a product. It is not. That is a onerous burden. Mm-hmm. It is a whole legal case that needs to be built and taken to court in order to be able to do that. We actually rely heavily on industry being very compliant voluntarily and their willingness to do the right things. So the more we encourage that, the better off I think everybody is, the faster we can get the products to market, the faster we can take action when there's an issue.
Okay. All right. And kind of building on that, what's the biggest challenge that the FDA faces with quality? So on the opposite side.
Yeah. So I would state that one of the biggest challenges that we have is, and this is maybe from an FDA standpoint in some ways, is trying to reset and disrupt that mindset of those very siloed systems that we've kind of encouraged and allowed to be created in order to really allow manufacturers to do what they need to do, but at the same time, make it easy for us to recognize that the right things are still being done. So it's a challenge, right? Our structure, our systems, and our way of really in current state auditing aren't geared towards seeing that.
So how can these medical device manufacturers get beyond this to really get focused on the quality?
So one of the things that we are doing with the initiative and what we're doing in Cisco Quality, one of the reasons we've engaged so much with CMMI was the development of what we call the Medical Device Discovery Appraisal program, which is really just a tailored application of the existing maturity model. I think it's version 2.0 that we're using right now. For application in the medical device space in the specific format. That allows a different way of recognizing, focus on outcomes, really, what the quality system is delivering. And it's going to take a mindset like that in order to really shift the dynamic.
Okay. So all things are indicating is that everybody is really pleased and happy with the program. But do you think that's because it's just a different way of looking at it and the burden on the company is a lot less, or are they actually seeing the benefits?
So there's I think a little bit of a misnomer on that with the idea that what they're seeing or feeling is like we are releasing a little bit of the pressure and burden. In reality, we're not really releasing a lot. We're releasing just enough of what we recognize were the pain points that were kind of holding up their ability to move. Most of the manufacturers, once they've got a little bit of that relief, they're actually doing more than what they would have been doing or we would have prescribed beforehand. And that focus is actually showing and delivering different sets of results and true performance for them, their organizations. They're seeing it in their product. It's been a really interesting dynamic to have a lot of these companies go from, in the very beginning, okay, we'll try this. Here's another FDA initiative that they're trying out. Who knows if it's going to stick, to a year later saying, you guys really have to come back and see this in action. Come in and you can kind of be part of the assessment of the appraisal, which was something that was not even considered in the very beginning. Yeah, and I was wondering about that. Have you participated on some of these revisits? I did. And different solutions have come up to different problems as we've been going through the course of the pilot. One of the ones that I've been just most fascinated with was the industry stepping up and loaning its own set of staff, volunteers, trained people that they went and got sent to go appraise other companies to be part of the embedded appraisal teams. That, when we've gone to some of these assessments, first of all, even with me as an FDA person there, the openness and candor of the participants through that dynamic, when it's not focused on, are you compliant? Let's just figure out what you're doing, what is it right, what's working and what's not working. Completely different dynamic, and they're completely open with everybody in the room, including me, who's there as an FDA individual on these appraisals. But it always is interesting to me that sometimes the hardest people are the very people from the company themselves.
Yeah, I've seen that. Internal people tend to be much harder on themselves than external supplies.
Yeah.
So have you been through an FDA audit yourself, or was this the MDDAP the first time you've actually seen something?
So I have not been on an actual FDA audit. Mm-hmm. Only our investigators typically do that. I worked for a long time with the compliance officer, so I got the outputs of the audit to try to build up and deliver the cases and what was supportable and not supportable from those aspects.
Yeah, I'd be kind of curious to see if somebody who's an FDA auditor would participate, if they could hold their tongue and just let the process flow and see what would happen.
So we actually, one of the people who've been involved and is now back on our team, she's detailed back in. Her name is Bleda Vunici. She was very much an FDA medical device auditor. From the standpoint and qualifications, they're a very good one. She knew how to find what she needed to do. From the onset, after seeing this the first time, when I think it was Innovize who was willing to put themselves out there and allowed us to even be present during the appraisal through video. From the minute she saw how people went from a very closed off, way back environment to by the end of the session, leaning in and completely just telling everybody, no, that's not what we do. That's not what happens. That's exactly here, or no, this is happening over here. She was bought in right from the beginning, and she actually participated in the same appraisal that I did for one of the companies.
Okay, I wonder, would you be able to share a story how you have helped the FDA or even the medical device manufacturers overcome these obstacles and succeed with the case for quality?
So it's little by little, but one of the things that we wanted to do, and I think has been big, in order to build up the collaboration, the trust that it really takes and it entails to move the system. We as an FDA put some commitments on the table. Here's how we will behave as long as you are behaving in this fashion. That doesn't mean everything always goes right, right? Sometimes our systems are just as disconnected as I think we've seen in some of the manufacturers. Sometimes the left hand is doing one thing, the right hand is doing another, and makes us happen. One of the things that's been beneficial is that when that does occur, and companies will come and let me know, hey, just as heads up, because we did ask for that. We want the open feedback. We want to know when the failures are happening, or else we can't correct them. We can take an action, and for the most part, we've been able to resolve the majority of the activities. I think that has gone a long way to demonstrating to companies that, yeah, we are committed. They are sticking to their word, so we can trust this. We can stick with ours. I had one company who, I think who is their sponsor, had gone on vacation, and I think I recall him telling me that he was mountain biking up on a mountain somewhere when he got a call from his company saying that, they had just gotten a call that we were going to show up from an FDA standpoint for an audit, despite them being participants in the program, which we guaranteed wasn't going to happen unless it was a for-cause situation. So he called me down. He said, let's see what I can do. He called me from there, sent an email. I looked into it. It was just, again, one of those left hand, right hand, not talking, easily fixed, done. And he mentioned that by the end of it, he looked like a miracle worker on his side. And it wasn't anything significant. It's just correcting little things that happen and glitches that I think we could collectively understand happen on both sides.
Okay. So is it safe to say the moral of the story is setting expectations and communicating?
It's setting expectations, communicating, following through, right? Yeah. It's on both sides. I think that's going to be the biggest portion. We've seen even in some cases, we've tried to set a target deadline for these appraisals happening. But one of the goals was to see just what are all the pieces that need to go in place to make it happen. We said 90 days. We've seen them on average being somewhere in the 130 mark. We've had a company recently who, by no fault of their own, they've got every intention to try to get things done, and something always is happening that shifts the dynamic, and they've had theirs pushed out a little bit further, and they're beyond that window. What we had said even in the beginning is, even if it needs to go past what we've set as a target, if you can keep us in the loop, keep the communication lines open, let us know what's going on, honor that commitment, that's okay. We can make adjustments. And I think that's been key. And I think even with regards to some of the modifications and the submissions that we've been seeing, we've seen manufacturers really try to push the envelope on things with no intent to do things negatively. It's just, let's see how far we go. And when we find the breaking points, nothing gets let out into the market anyways. It's not like that misses. It's just, we pause it, step back, let's reassess that, and then understand now it's a clear definition. We put that into the next round of communications for everybody, and we go from there.
Okay. And I guess also part of it is the fact that they're still operating as the FDA audits, and so they think there's a lot more to do than to get relaxed and go through this discovery exercise.
I think that's the that's the dynamic. That doesn't matter how many times we've said it, how many times I've had companies stand up on stage and share their experience. Until the company goes through it for the first time themselves, they don't recognize the difference and distinction.
And I've seen that with the two I've been on, where you go in and they're all kind of, they think they need their back room full of people to support, and we say, no, we just need you. You don't need to bring all these other people in. And it's a crowd control issue, trying to scope it back.
All the people who get brought in that you can tell them, no, you guys can go back and do your work that you normally would do.
Yeah, and then once they realize that's what it's all about, then they relax a whole lot more. Yeah. So at your keynote speech last year at the 2018 Capability Counts Conference, that's what's really inspired me to join the MDDAP program. So you told a very fascinating story about your personal journey. So could you please relate that?
So my background is not originally in medical devices. I used to work in semiconductors. And I did share, because when I even started within the medical device industry here, I mentioned that it was my grandmother, who was very much just like anybody. We've all been at some point in time a patient. But she was basically the person who raised me for the most part. My parents were both working, so I was always in her care. And she would always talk about the pacemaker she had and how she was getting shocks all the time, and tended to dismiss things like that. But then come to work for the FDA, and having worked, in semiconductors, I worked on the Sony PlayStation, the Nintendo Wii when it was released, the revision of the Xbox that came after the 360. Come in, and the first thing I encounter is a situation of a issue that's happening with electronic components, capacitors are on there, that was encountered in all these gaming systems 5 years earlier. I mean, they saw it, fixed it in a matter of, short time, and it was just starting to hit medical devices in a broad sense and scale. And they didn't have the volumes, the capability, the kind of action or speed to adjust that you'd see everywhere else. So, it's one of those things that always stuck with me, because the result of the failures was inadvertent shocks, continuous inadvertent shocks. And it always dawned back on me that maybe something was going on, and it could have been prevented. If we had just learned the lessons there, if they could have just applied those lessons. But that wasn't being communicated. It wasn't being captured. there was no other resource or recourse for a lot of the medical device manufacturers. So it was something that stuck with me as, there has to be a better way. We're a little bit behind the times on what's state of the art.
So would you consider that a defining moment in your life to become an advocate for quality, or is there something else that kind of is epiphany?
No, so as an overall advocate for quality, I think I can blame somebody I used to work with at IBM, who was just a phenomenal mentor around it. But it definitely was a defining moment in terms of here coming into the agency and making a shift in this direction for the efforts. I do recall, and I've even shared this story internally, right? First concept doing some of these first reviews, very compliance-driven reviews. It was a very frustrating environment, right? Because there's so many limits on what we can do or can say. Knowing that there's other options and other ways to do things. Then, by some miracle of chance, and I didn't know if I was actually going to stick around at FDA for long term, the initiative kicked off maybe a year or two later. And when it sounded, I was like, okay, this is it. This will make a difference. I've got to figure out a way to help drive that or get involved with that, and did work towards that goal at that point in time. And it has been engaging since it started.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, how about, can you share an experience you had like early on in your life that still influences how you approach business today?
So, let's see. I think early on in life, if I had to, I could go a couple of routes with this one because there's been several. But let's see, one that was just one that is a big takeaway, right? It's just coming out of college, you're going into your first job.
Yeah.
You've got a little bit of hubris, right? There's some humility that you've got to learn. Learn that fairly quickly where, suddenly I'm working on something and the numbers were coming out bad, and it wasn't possible that I had maybe coded something wrong in the system there. It was obviously that I had to redefine Ohm's law. That's what happened. Ohm was wrong all these years. So that, luckily I had a really good mentor working with me. And like I said, they've been very influential on that point in time, who was very patient and let me walk through the logic until it stuck with me that, that was a little bit, prevented any further embarrassment in that end. But the other, I think, aspect of things was that it's okay to, consider you're not going to put somebody in any type of jeopardy or the business in jeopardy. But the other thing that came out of a lot of that learning was within the confines of that, the main focus, the main goal is always solve the problem, right? That's always going to be what you need to be focused on. Everything else, process, even around some of the activities and containments, all those are typically means for addressing the common. Mm-hmm. But if you let that drive the people in the process, you will end up with a really bad result.
Yeah.
So it's always about getting everybody centered around solve the problem, and then everything else can be adjusted to capture that case.
Right. And when you focus on that, the engineers immediately jump to a solution.
Oh my God, yes.
You got to break something, pull them way back.
Yes. One of the things that we've seen in the course of the pilot in this year has been, again, talk about siloed systems that developed over time. It's just a bloated system for corrective actions and preventive actions, right? Our CAPA system. And I recall one of the industry sponsors for that sub-project that we're working on now to help bring it back to its original problem-solving roots, stating that, she's got a boatload of engineers, all who love to solve problems. Mm-hmm. Tell them they've got a CAPA, they shut down and they walk away. No one wants to take on a CAPA because it's become a documentation exercise, right? A documentary burden versus a problem-solving effort.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's just all perceptions. Again,
Right.
people think it's the overhead; they're going to back off. Okay, so what does success look like for the FDA in the case for quality?
So I'm going to quote what our center director said during one of our MDIC forums, because for him, success would be that the word compliance gets dropped from the lexicon, right? And I know that comes off a little bit shocking to people, but there is a sub-element to what that means, right? It's compliance is no longer your end goal, right? That's just a means of providing a base set of stability. Mm-hmm. Your end goal is this achieving, never reachable target of delivering your best quality for your customer. Focus on that. Compliance just becomes a byproduct. It just happens.
Yeah.
So that's really what was driving. And I think the ultimate success of this is we have this collaborative system that isn't just FDA is enforcing according to regulation. It is the entire medical device ecosystem, each contributing its piece, each contributing its set of data, its information to help keep driving the product improvements, to help exposing where in the system the next problem is that we've got to tackle and drive, instead of just hammering home a warning letter or an inspection or a 483 or an observation of some sort.
Yeah. And that's part of what I think is really great with this program too, is that you're using the model to actually use the model as opposed to give them a grade on an appraisal, which really just doesn't help much. But the actual putting this into use is where the value is.
Yeah, and that was a really fortunate opportunity and learning that we took early on. Several people from the Institute, Becky as well, just connected us with a panel of people who, right from the onset, advised us of the perils of doing this. And we had to rethink, this is really about rewarding the journey, not the rating.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's it. I call it the Zen of process improvement. The journey is much more important than the end state.
Right.
So what is the most important question the device manufacturers should be asking when they consider this program?
What is the most important question they should be considering or asking for themselves?
Yes.
Or of themselves?
Yeah, why should I even bother participating?
So one of the things that we've always said is you don't necessarily have to, right? We've actually, all things considered, for the volume of products we do on an annual basis, you can get by with the compliance efforts and activities. Mm-hmm. We all want to move past that. We want to enable a system that really is about delivering the best for that patient, which in turn actually delivers a lot better for your business. So the questions for the manufacturers that they should be asking themselves is, am I content to continue operating this way? Or, the FDA is changing the dynamic. Do I want to drive better? If I'm making a profit here, okay, that's entirely up to you. You can do more, you can do better, and we're willing to acknowledge and recognize that and offer and shift our engagement for that. So it's a situation of, I can stay this way and be stable for now, but when everybody else is doing it, can I afford not to be moving in that direction? Okay.
And then kind of a follow-up question, which I mentioned to you when we were at the conference. What about startups, medical device startups?
Yes.
How do they fit in this picture?
So what we have is a few things going on with that, but one of the things we recognized early on, the model can be applied, right, to a medical device startup, but medical device startups are struggling with a lot of other initial issues. So what we can do is tailor portions of the model to target setting them up to start building everything foundationally and systemically up the right way, instead of focusing them on what I've heard up until now, even trying to hire a consultant to help them set up a compliance system, trying to understand if they don't have the money to do that, big systems themselves and set up something that's compliant that oftentimes isn't even reflective of how they would do the work or how they want to approach things. There's a better way to do it, and compliance is an output, and we can stage things with this. So this provides a mechanism for allowing them to learn it from the beginning.
I would apply for a job measuring scale.
Don't know why my phone just went off like that. From the beginning, to set up their system to be focused on delivering the best outcome, measuring it based on the outcomes, not on the documents that they developed to meet the FDA. Now, part of that is an education portion, which if we've got the capacity through what we're building out here or some of the other collaborations we're building, is a better way to target startups. So there may be a variant of the program that exists for startups that is more focused and partnered with maybe other organizations like NIST and their MEP program, which is the Manufacturing Extension Program, that delivers that education component right from the beginning. So it's something that we factored in and knew we'd have to build a variant of this down the road.
Sure.
Just freeing up the capacity to do that once we start getting some of the ones that are already established moving in this direction will be something I think that the whole center can get around.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Just one final question is, so if somebody's interested or the device manufacturer sees this video, how can they get in contact with you and learn more about the program?
So they could always email me directly if they need to, or we do have a general mailbox for the Case for Quality. It is simply Case for Quality, all one word, at fda.hhs.gov. They can email that and get more information. They can go to the MDIC website, mdic.org, and get a lot of the connections to both CMMI, to FDA, the contact points from there. And on our website, FDA, it's available, and the email address and contact points are also there.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. You've got a lot of interesting information. Helps me out and learn more about the program, even though I've got my feet already. But I'm looking forward to it, and I think it's great. It's you feel like you're going to benefit people with this. So that's really what I think is great about it.
I think that's the one thing I've heard everybody say they can get around once they start fully understanding what's going on and how it's working.
Okay. Well, Cisco, again, thank you so much for your time this evening, and I'll say good night to you.
That's good. Good night, Henry. Thank you very much for that.
Sure. Bye-bye.